The clatter of boots against the polished concrete floor echoed in the vast, sterile space of the military barracks. I stood in the corner, adjusting my uniform for the umpteenth time. Not that it mattered. There was a certain expectation when you're stationed at Fort McAllister. And I was nothing more than a small-town girl from Wyoming, hoping to prove myself in a world that didn't care for the quiet ones. I knew that, but what I didn't know was how much of an uphill battle it was going to be. My name's Jackie Walker. If you asked anyone here, they'd probably tell you that I was just a grunt, the one that didn't fit in. I guess that's what happens when you're built like a linebacker, but can't afford the latest tech gadgets that everyone else has. My job? I was assigned to logistics. Not exactly what I'd signed up for when I enlisted, but you learn quickly that in the Army, things don't always go your way. And the worst part, the guys in my unit, they knew I didn't belong. The whispers, the side eyes, it wasn't subtle. "You really think you're cut out for this, Walker?" Sergeant Daniels would sneer when I showed up for a shift. He was the first to point out that I didn't have a military look. Not tall enough, not slim enough, not tough enough. And don't get me started on Specialist Brown, who once told me, "You'd be a better fit carrying bags at the PX than handling anything in a real mission." It's funny, I never let them see how much it hurt. But the real dagger, the one I couldn't escape, it came from Major Owens, my supervisor, who would make me double-check his orders while he barked instructions at the others. His voice, always condescending, would drop when it came to me. "Walker," he'd say, scanning my face, "you may be tough, but this isn't just about strength. It's about having the right mindset. You might want to think about a desk job when you get back home." I kept quiet, nodded along, even smiled in the face of his insults. It was a mask, sure, but what else was I supposed to do? I had bills to pay, a family depending on me back home. My father, a Vietnam vet, always told me that being part of something bigger than yourself required swallowing a lot of pride. So I did. I swallowed. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just another soldier. I knew there was more to me than this. Somewhere in my chest, there was a fire waiting to burn. I just needed the right moment to let it out. And God help anyone who underestimated me once that happened. No one knew, but in my free time, I studied strategy. I'd print out old battlefield tactics from World War II and cross-reference them with modern warfare. I memorized every detail, even the most obscure parts of the Army's operational manuals. When everyone was out partying, I was poring over maps, scribbling plans in my notebook. One night, I overheard a conversation in the break room between Lieutenant Harris and Sergeant Daniels. They were talking about an upcoming mission, a risky one. They were planning to take down a heavily fortified enemy outpost in the middle of the desert, and that's when it hit me. I could do it. I had the knowledge. I had the skills. But no one would give me the chance. So instead of sleeping, I stayed up all night, drafting a plan for the mission. The next morning, with my heart pounding in my chest, I walked up to Lieutenant Harris. "I think I have a plan," I said, trying to steady my voice. He looked at me with the same skeptical expression he always had. "You?" He glanced over at Sergeant Daniels, who chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, me," I said. "I've been studying the terrain, the enemy's movements, the logistics. I think I have something that could work." He shook his head, clearly not taking me seriously. "Walker, this isn't a school project. You need experience to lead a mission." But that's where it all started. Because deep down, I knew that if I could just prove that I had the brains to go with the brawn, things would change. And I wasn't about to let some asshole tell me I couldn't. I wish I could tell you that after that day, things got better for me. But the truth is, they didn't. Not right away. If anything, the pressure doubled. Every morning at 0500, we'd fall in line for PT, and I could feel the eyes on me before the first push-up even started. You'd think in the Army, where everyone wears the same uniform, people would judge you for performance, not background. But nah, old habits die hard. Daniels, with that permanent smirk plastered on his face, would whisper loud enough for the others to hear. "Hey, Walker, try not to pass out today, okay? Hate to see you faint before breakfast." The others chuckled, not because they all hated me, but because nobody wanted to be the one standing next to the weak link. That's how it works in the barracks. Respect is contagious, but so is disrespect. I kept my head down, counted every rep, every lap, every bead of sweat. Did I want to scream back at him? Hell yeah. But instead, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they're watching me this close, let them watch me outwork every damn one of them. So while most of the guys hit the PX for snacks or played Xbox in the rec room after chow, I'd stay behind, stretching until my arms felt like rubber bands. When the lights went out at 2200, I'd pull the blanket over my head, flashlight in one hand, and a tattered field manual in the other. Strategy, tactics, case studies from Desert Storm, Fallujah, even Vietnam. I devoured it all. If I couldn't win their respect by being the loudest voice, I'd win it by being the most prepared soldier on that field. Funny thing, though, sometimes the Army tests you in ways you don't see coming. About 3 weeks into this grind, we were assigned to run a field exercise, mock convoy escort through hostile terrain. Harris was in charge, but halfway through the simulation, comms went down. Chaos everywhere. Trucks stuck, Humvees in the wrong place, guys yelling over each other. And you know what Harris did? He froze. Just stood there, headset dangling, mouth half open, like someone unplugged him. Everyone looked around, waiting for orders that weren't coming. My heart was pounding, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, I'd get crucified. Still, letting my unit fall apart in silence wasn't an option. So I spoke, quietly at first. Switch to hand signals. Alpha team, flank left. Bravo, cover the convoy rear. I pointed, gestured, and somehow they listened. Within minutes, the mock ambush was neutralized. And guess what happened after? Nothing. Not a single word of acknowledgement. When we got back, Harris took the credit in front of the major, claiming he redirected the squad in time. I just stood there, my uniform soaked in sweat, jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. It stung, man. Deep. But at the same time, something shifted inside me. Because for the first time, I didn't need their approval to know I was capable. I'd tasted leadership, and it felt natural, like something that had been buried under years of self-doubt. I could lead. And no smirk from Daniels or cold shoulder from Harris could erase that. Still, those little digs kept coming. One night, in the barracks, Daniels tossed me a broom and laughed. Hey, Walker, why don't you practice leading this into battle? Might be the only command you ever get. The room erupted. I laughed too. What else could I do? But when the lights went out, I sat on my bunk, staring at that broom, thinking, you just wait. One day, I'll be holding the kind of authority you can't joke away. Not everyone was cruel, though. Private Morales, quiet kid from Texas, sometimes caught me scribbling in my notebook. He'd nod, never asked, never judged. One night he leaned over and whispered, you ever thought about trying officer candidate school? You're different, Walker. Not loud, not cocky, but you see things, that's rare. I didn't answer him then, but his words lit a fuse. Because deep down I knew he was right. I wasn't like the others. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't a weakness. Maybe it was my edge. What kept me going wasn't glory or promotions. It was my old man's voice in the back of my head. The Army doesn't care about where you come from, Jackie. It cares about who shows up when things go to hell. I carried that like body armor. And even on the worst days when I wanted to quit, when I wanted to throw my boots in the dumpster behind the mess hall and hop the first bus home, I remembered that. Show up when things go to hell. That was my compass. So I pushed on, day after day, through the smirks, the dismissals, the silence. They thought I was invisible, a placeholder in the background. But what they didn't know was that invisibility was my training ground. While they laughed, I was sharpening my blade. And sooner or later, they were going to see just how sharp it was. If you'd asked me a month ago if I'd be standing here, with this much responsibility on my shoulders, I'd have laughed in your face. But here I am, leading a mission none of us were ready for. The real deal, not some training exercise. This was no longer about proving myself to the guys or getting a nod from Harris or Daniels. It was about survival. And the truth was, I wasn't just worried about my team's survival. I was worried about mine. It all started with a radio call during one of those routine patrols. You know the ones, hot as hell, dust everywhere. and a mission that feels like it's just to keep you busy. We were supposed to be watching a few civilian trucks heading into enemy-controlled territory, just making sure they weren't transporting anything we'd need to worry about. Easy job, right? The kind of thing most people half-ass. But then things went sideways. We were about a mile outside the base when the convoy got ambushed. There was no warning, no signal, just the unmistakable crack of gunfire from the hills, and suddenly we were under fire. Our lead vehicle was hit, and I watched it careen off the road like a car you see in a movie. I couldn't even process it fast enough. The shock hit me in waves. For a moment, I thought maybe I was dreaming, but the noise around me, the popping of bullets, the screeching tires, it was all too real. I scanned the situation in a heartbeat. Harris was yelling orders into the radio, but there was no one listening. Daniels, as usual, was off to the side, looking like he was trying to be useful but failing. I could feel the panic creeping in. No one was thinking clearly, not even Harris. That's when I snapped. I didn't think about it, I just acted. "Lieutenant, get your head in the game," I screamed over the chaos. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I was clear-headed. I didn't wait for permission. "Move out! Alpha, secure the perimeter! Bravo, cover the rear!" I had no idea what I was doing, but that didn't matter. What mattered was action. I took charge. It wasn't pretty. There were bullets flying everywhere. I heard the crack of them slicing through the air like a whip, but I couldn't focus on that. I focused on the men. I kept my voice steady. "Keep your heads down. Move now." And somehow it worked. They listened. I didn't expect them to. I had never led a team in anything like this, but in that moment, they followed. They had no choice. I wasn't waiting for anyone else to step up. And when it was over, when the enemy was neutralized and we got the convoy moving again, I was still in shock. But the moment we got back to base, everything changed. It wasn't just the adrenaline rush that kept me from collapsing. It was the realization that I'd finally done it. They didn't just see me as the quiet oddball girl anymore. They saw me as someone who could get things done. It felt weird, honestly. They were all suddenly looking at me differently. But what really hit me was how Harris looked at me after the debriefing. His face was pale, lips tight, but there was a flicker in his eyes. I couldn't tell if he was scared, impressed, or both. "Walker, he started, but I interrupted him before he could finish. "You're welcome," I said, keeping my tone even, though I wanted to snap at him for every single time he'd ever doubted me. "I think we can call this mission a success, don't you?" His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Then there was Daniels. As always, he had that smug smile plastered on his face. But this time, something was different. He couldn't look me in the eye, and I don't know why, but that made me feel something I couldn't quite place. Satisfaction? Vindication? Maybe a little of both. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. The usual round of backslaps and good job from the guys felt hollow. Nobody had told me what I wanted to hear. No, "Nice job, Walker." No, "I didn't think you had it in you." But that's the thing with the military. No one hands you a medal for doing what's right. You just do it because it has to be done. But there was a difference now. They were still trying to brush me off, to pretend like they weren't impressed. But the truth was out. I had done something they hadn't expected. And that's when I realized something important. I wasn't in the Army to earn their respect. I was here to earn my own. When the dust settled and the mission was over, I finally allowed myself to breathe. But it wasn't relief. It wasn't pride. It was something else. Something I hadn't felt before. For the first time, I knew my place. And it wasn't just as a grunt in the back of the line. I was a leader. Not in some dramatic, showy way, but in the real way when it counted. What I didn't expect, though, was the phone call later that night. I had just gotten back to my barracks, sweaty, tired, and running on fumes when the office called. "Lieutenant Harris needs you in his office. Now." My stomach dropped. I figured he was going to try to take credit for everything, or worse, blame me for the mess. So I dragged myself over there, ready for whatever came. But when I walked in, Harris wasn't alone. Major Owens was sitting across from him, and right beside him was Sergeant Daniels. His arms were crossed, and for the first time, he wasn't sneering. He wasn't smiling either. In fact, he looked concerned. Harris looked at me like I was some kind of puzzle he just figured out. "Walker," Harris said, his voice tight, "we need you to run point on the next operation." He said it with an edge that I couldn't quite read. Was it respect? Or was it a challenge? Either way, it didn't matter. Because in that moment, something shifted. They didn't see me as the underdog anymore. They saw me as the one who'd saved their asses. And that was just the beginning. I didn't need to wait for the next mission. I was already there. You know, they say the military is like family, but what they don't tell you is how complicated that family can get when the person you've been forced to fight for respect with suddenly needs you to fight beside them. After everything, I expected the world to flip. I figured Daniels and Harris would change the way they looked at me. And they did. But it wasn't as easy as I thought. People don't just hand over respect after one good mission. You have to earn it over and over again. But the thing that stuck with me the most wasn't the sudden nods or the silence that followed my success. It was the awkwardness that came with it. I could feel it in the barracks, like there was a shift in the air that no one knew how to address. I remember the first time I saw Harris after the mission. It was just a few days later in the mess hall. We just finished chow, and I was sitting at the usual spot picking at my food, trying to ignore the looks from the guys around me. I didn't care about their stares. I knew they'd never outright say it, but deep down, they were looking at me with a different kind of respect now. Something I'd wanted from day one. And there he was, Harris, standing in front of my table. He had his tray in his hand, and for a second I thought he was going to ignore me, like he always did. But this time he didn't. "Walker," he said, voice low, almost like he didn't know how to phrase the next part. "Listen, I want to apologize." My fork halfway to my mouth, I froze. This was the guy who used to laugh at me, who used to look at me like I didn't belong. But here he was, standing in front of me, swallowing his pride. "You did good out there. You really saved our asses," he added, glancing around to make sure no one else was eavesdropping. "I didn't think you had it in you, but you did." I sat there staring at him for a second. He wasn't giving me the typical, "Good job, Walker," with that fake smile. This was real, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I didn't need his apology. Hell, I wasn't looking for it. I just wanted him to know that it wasn't about me proving anything to him. It was about me proving to myself that I could be more than the quiet girl in the back. So I nodded. "Thanks, Harris, but it's not about you or me. It's about the mission. It's about getting things done when it counts." He stood there for a moment longer, still awkward, like he was expecting something more. But I wasn't going to give it to him. Not this time. The apology was nice, but I wasn't the same person I was a few months ago, trying to please everyone around me. I'd come to terms with the fact that people didn't always change overnight. But for once, I didn't need him to change. I had already changed. As for Daniels, well, that was another story. I hadn't expected him to walk up to me and offer an apology, hell no. But I didn't expect him to be as cold as he was either. Every time I saw him in the halls or passing by on a patrol, he'd look right through me. He never said anything, never even acknowledged the fact that I was now the one leading operations. And that pissed me off, not because I needed his acknowledgement, but because he couldn't handle the fact that his image of me was shattered. One evening, a week after the mission, I caught him outside, leaning against the building, looking like he was avoiding something. I didn't say anything at first, but he was standing there, just waiting. I couldn't stand the silence anymore, so I walked up to him. "You got something to say, Daniels?" I asked, my tone colder than I meant it to be. He looked up at me, and for a second, I saw a flash of guilt in his eyes. He opened his mouth like he was about to speak, but nothing came out. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime of nothing, he muttered something under his breath. "Guess I underestimated you," he said, eyes darting away. "I wasn't expecting you to actually pull it off, but you did, and I guess I'm not the only one who noticed." For a second, I thought about letting it go, but then the words came out before I could stop myself. "Yeah, you weren't the only one." He didn't say anything back. He didn't need to. That was it. The silence between us spoke louder than any apology could. He had finally seen me for what I was, a soldier who earned her place. But I didn't need his respect anymore. And that's when I realized I didn't need anyone's validation. I had found my own worth. It wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong anymore. It was about me being the best version of myself, no matter what anyone else thought. As for the rest of the team, they were still trying to figure out how to react to this new version of me. The quiet girl who once kept her head down had now taken control of the battlefield. But the thing about the military is, respect isn't handed out for free. You earn it every damn day. So I kept my head in the game, kept pushing forward. But I wasn't doing it for them anymore. I was doing it for me. And that felt like the most powerful thing of all. I remember one evening, sitting on the roof of our barracks watching the sunset. The wind was light, the air was cooler than usual, and for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. Not because everything was perfect, but because I knew I had made it. I was no longer the person who had to prove something. I was the person everyone else had to prove themselves to. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stop pushing forward. Not for them, not for anyone else. Just for me. Because in the end, that's all that really matters. I can't say it was a clean break when I left that unit. You think you walk away from something and it's over? But the truth is, things linger. And it wasn't like I had this big mic drop moment when I left the military. The goodbyes weren't dramatic. There was no one standing at the door begging me to stay. The truth is, I just woke up one day, packed my gear, and left. It wasn't a decision I made on impulse, but after everything, I realized I didn't need to prove myself there anymore. I had already done it. What I needed now was something different, a life that had more to do with me than just proving people wrong. That day after I packed up my stuff, I went to the mess hall for my last breakfast. The guys were there, all doing the same thing they always did, talking loud, joking about whatever was trending, the usual chatter. But it was different now. I wasn't just another person sitting there with them. I was someone who had earned her seat at the table, and it felt damn good. But I didn't let it show. I wasn't there to rub it in anyone's face. It was about closure. For me and for them. Harris caught my eye from across the room. He was sitting at his usual spot, half-heartedly poking at his scrambled eggs. He nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement that meant more than any handshake could have. I could tell by the way he looked at me that he finally saw me for who I was. Not the girl who was fighting for respect, but the woman who had earned it. I didn't feel the need to go over there. Didn't need to get anything else from him. I had my moment of victory in my own way. Then there was Daniels. I knew he wouldn't change overnight. Hell, I didn't expect him to ever look at me the way Harris did. But for the first time since we'd met, I saw him watching me with something other than contempt. He was still Daniels, the same cocky, arrogant guy who'd made every effort to put me in my place. But now there was respect in the way he looked at me. He didn't say anything, didn't offer an apology, and honestly, I didn't need it. I had come to accept that some people would never admit when they were wrong, but I knew deep down that he knew what I was capable of now, and that was enough. As I packed the last of my stuff into the back of the Jeep, my heart felt light. It wasn't just because I was leaving the military. It was because I was walking away with something I hadn't had when I came in, a sense of self. I didn't need the title, the uniform, or anyone's approval anymore. I had earned it, not by following the rules or playing it safe, but by pushing past my own limits, by learning the hard way that I could lead when it counted. And that's what I had learned from every moment of doubt, every sneer, and every attempt to knock me down. There's a strange thing that happens when you stop caring about what other people think. It's not about becoming arrogant, but rather freeing yourself from the need for validation. I didn't need to prove I was a leader anymore. I was one. I didn't need to be anyone's idea of perfect. I just needed to be myself. The real test came when I stepped out into the civilian world. It was harder than I expected. The streets were quieter, people didn't shout orders at you, and the only drill sergeants were the ones in my head. But the lessons I learned in the Army about grit, survival, and leadership stayed with me. They shaped the way I handled life's curveballs. I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I was a woman who had been through the fire and came out the other side stronger. A few months later, I got a call from my old team. They were heading out on another mission, one they were short on hands for. They needed someone who knew how to handle pressure, someone who could keep their head when everything was falling apart. They needed me. For a second, I hesitated. I'd moved on, I thought, but then I realized something. I wasn't leaving the army behind. I was carrying it with me. Those experiences, those skills, they were part of who I was now. I didn't need to wear the uniform to prove that. When I showed up, a few of the guys looked surprised. Some of them were still trying to wrap their heads around how much I'd changed. But the real surprise came when we hit the ground running. The mission was a success, and by the time we were back in the briefing room, I didn't feel the need to say anything. No applause, no pats on the back. We just did what needed to be done. And that was enough. So what's the lesson in all this? It's simple. Don't let anyone, whether it's a drill sergeant, a teammate, or even a friend, tell you who you are. You don't need their approval, and you don't need their validation. The only person who can define your worth is you. You've got to walk your own path, and even when it's tough, even when you're the underdog, keep pushing forward. Because one day they'll see you for who you truly are. And that's the moment when everything changes. You're no longer fighting for a seat at the table. You've built your own. And as I look back on it all, I know one thing for sure. No matter what happens next, I'll always be the woman who earned her place on her own terms. The core lesson from this story is about recognizing and embracing your own worth, even when others fail to see it. In a world full of judgment and bias, it's easy to fall into the trap of doubting yourself, especially when those around you don't acknowledge your efforts. But just like gold doesn't fear the fire, you too have the strength to rise above. The story reminds us that facing adversity is not about seeking approval or validation from others. It's about trusting in your own abilities and staying true to who you are. Whether it's in the workplace, with family, or in the broader society, we must break the silence around injustice and negative stereotypes. Only by confronting these toxic relationships and biases head-on can we discover our true potential. This lesson is vital for anyone at any stage in life, especially those who've experienced setbacks or felt overlooked. It's never too late to reclaim your confidence and stand firm in your own truth. As the saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We don't have to change everything overnight. We just need to keep moving forward, one step at a time. If you found inspiration in this story or have a similar experience to share, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Don't forget to like and share if this message resonated with you, and be sure to subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Wishing you peace and strength in your journey ahead. May you always remember that, no matter how tough things get, your worth is never in question. Keep going, and the world will see you for who you truly are.